My company CEO had ghost employees on payroll for 3 years. I found out when a real employee reported his duplicated number. What I found when I started looking almost cost me my career. There are frauds that operate directly in the area of the person who should detect them. Not because of that person's negligence. By design. Because whoever builds it knows exactly what controls exist and has built the scheme in the only space between those controls where it can operate without being seen. The ghost employee scheme I found in my company had been built that way, in the exact space where I had partial but not total visibility, using my area, human resources, as the vehicle, but operating in a layer of the system where I did not have direct access, which meant that when it was discovered, the first person who was going to have to explain how they had not seen it was me. My name is Adriana. I am 43 years old. I am a human resources manager with 16 years of experience, and I spent 4 years at a mid-sized management consulting company where I had built an area that in any external evaluation would have been considered solid and well-managed. My CEO's name was Rodrigo. He was 51 years old. He had been at the company for 8 years. He was the kind of director teams want to have: clear, demanding, recognizing of achievements, with a business vision that had taken the company from 20 to 80 employees in 8 years. What I did not know was that part of that growth on paper had been artificial. The employee who reported the problem to me was named Daniel. He was 32 years old. He had been at the company for 2 years as a systems analyst. He arrived at my office on a Monday morning with the expression of someone who has information they do not exactly know how to process. He told me he had been reviewing the access logs to the project management system and had found that his employee number, the unique code that identified him in all company systems, was associated with 2 different profiles. One was his. The other had a different name, and system credentials that had been used to access projects Daniel had never worked on. I told Daniel I was going to review it and that in the meantime, he should not comment on this to anyone. I closed my office door and I started looking. The first level of search was in the human resources system I directly managed. I searched for the name Daniel had given me. It existed as an active employee, with an entry date from 2 years ago, with a senior analyst position, with a salary in the mid to high range for that level, with an employee number that was Daniel's with a 1-digit variation, but without a photo in the file, without a scan contract, without any of the documents I required for all hires I processed. What I had was a file that had been created with administrator access. Access I had, that Rodrigo also had, and that the finance director, a woman named Cecilia, also had because she processed payroll. I checked the creation date of the file. It had been created at 11 at night on a Sunday. I did not work Sunday nights at 11. I searched further. I reviewed all active employees in the system with the attention of someone who already knows what they are looking for. I looked specifically for files without a photo, files without a scan contract, files created outside business hours, files with employee numbers that were variations of existing numbers. In 3 hours of searching, I found 17 files that met at least 3 of those 4 criteria. 17. In a company of 80 employees. 17 employees who, when I searched the company directory, did not appear. Who, when I called the registered phone numbers, got busy signals or non-existent numbers. Whose corporate emails had been created but had never sent or received a real email. I calculated the payroll for those 17 employees. The registered salaries added up to approximately 900,000 pesos per month. 3 years of operation. If the scheme had been running for 3 years, as the oldest creation dates indicated, the total diverted amount was approximately 32 million pesos. 32 million. In a company of 80 employees. What I did next was the most important thing of everything that followed. I did not go to Rodrigo. I did not go to Cecilia. I left the office at lunchtime with everything on my personal phone. I went to a nearby cafe, and I called my attorney. Her name was Patricia. She had spent 20 years in labor and corporate law. I described what I had found in 15 minutes. Patricia told me the first thing was that I should not do anything else in the company's systems without legal guidance, because any additional move could be interpreted in ways that would complicate things for me. That the second thing was to determine exactly what access I had had to those accounts and what evidence existed that I had not been the one who created them. That the third thing was that the scheme I described required reporting to authorities and that the process of that report was critical for my protection. That if I reported this correctly, I was in the position of the person who discovered the fraud. That if someone else discovered it first, I was in the position of someone who had access to the area and had not detected it. And that those two positions had very different consequences. I spent the rest of that Monday in the cafe with Patricia on the phone. We built the documentation of what I had found and when. Daniel's report as the starting point. The exact times of my system searches that day. The screenshots I had taken on my personal phone before leaving. The evidence that the files had been created at times when I had no registered activity in the system. Patricia told me not to go back to the office that evening, to arrive at normal time the following day, to act with total normalcy, that she was going to prepare what was necessary for the report to authorities to happen in the way that protected me. Tuesday morning, Patricia communicated directly with the company's board of directors, not with Rodrigo. The board had 3 members who were the founding partners and who in the day-to-day operations of the company had little presence, but who formally were the highest authority. Patricia presented them with a complete file. She explained that I had discovered the scheme the previous day and had acted immediately in accordance with corresponding protocols. The board's reaction was that of people receiving information that reorganizes 3 years of financial statements they had approved without any of the 3 having detected anything. Rodrigo was suspended that same Tuesday afternoon. Cecilia, the finance director, was also preventively suspended while her participation was determined. A forensic auditing firm was urgently contracted. The investigation lasted 4 months. What it determined was the following. Rodrigo had built the scheme 3 years ago with the complicity of Cecilia, who processed payroll and received a portion of what was diverted. The 17 ghost employees, 31,800,000 pesos diverted over 37 months. Rodrigo was formally charged. Cecilia reached a cooperation agreement that reduced her liability. The company initiated a civil asset recovery process. I was formally recognized by the board as the person who had detected and reported the fraud. That formal recognition was documented. It was important that it was documented. What cost me most of the entire process was not the investigation. It was the period between the Monday I discovered it and the Tuesday when the board took control. 22 hours. 22 hours where I knew what I knew and could not tell anyone at the company. Where I had to act normally in front of Rodrigo without him knowing what I knew. Where the slightest mistake on my part could have turned me from discover to suspect. That period was the hardest of my professional life. What I changed in my practice after this is concrete and documented in a new procedures manual for the company that I helped write during the reconstruction process. Administrator access to human resources and payroll systems separated between at least 2 people who do not report to the same figure. Quarterly audit of active files that includes verification of minimum required documentation. Automatic alert when a file is created outside business hours. Monthly cross-review between the active employee directory and the process payroll. Those controls did not exist before because they had not been deemed necessary. Or so we had thought. What I wanted to take from this story has parts for people in different positions. For human resources and finance professionals. Ghost employee fraud is one of the most common in mid-sized companies precisely because it operates in the space between who approves new hires and who processes payments. If those 2 functions fall to people who report to the same figure, or if a single person has control over both, the risk is real. The controls that detect it are simple. Periodic file audits, separation of functions, off-hours access alerts. The absence of those controls is not necessarily negligence. But when fraud occurs, the person who manages the area is the first who needs to demonstrate they did not participate. That demonstration is easier if the controls existed beforehand. For anyone in the position of discovering something like this, the first thing you do when you discover fraud at your company is not talk to your boss. It is to exit the system, document what you found with a timestamp, and seek legal guidance before making any additional move. The difference between discover and suspect can be a matter of hours in the order of actions. Protect yourself first. The justice process comes afterward. If this story impacted you, comment. Does your company have periodic cross-audits between payroll and the active employee directory? Like if you believe the separation of functions between who registers new employees and who processes payroll should be mandatory in all companies. Subscribe for more real stories. Share with someone who works in human resources or finance and who might benefit from reviewing whether these controls exist in their organization. Practical tip: if you work in HR or finance at a mid-sized company, propose a simple audit once per quarter. Take the list of active employees in the HR system, the active corporate email directory, and the process payroll, and verify that the three lists are identical. Any discrepancy between those three sources deserves immediate investigation. That audit takes 2 hours and is the first line of detection for ghost employees.